June 21st, 2016. Ms. Montalvo, would you call the roll, please?
Mister.
I know you're a veteran, but I'll give you that one. So roll call. Hold on, before you got it. Okay, Renee got it. John Anderson.
Here.
Thomas Beatty.
Here.
Jonathan David. No answer. Sedimir Jessic. No answer. Gary Johnson.
Here.
Steve Johnson. No answer. Bob LaSalle.
Here.
Henry McEnroth. And Mr. Mahoney.
Here.
Okay. So, double checking against the bylaws, but I believe we're one short of a quorum.
We've got 5 here. There are 9 on the committee.
So,
We
quorum's 6, though.
I think it was 50% plus
Is it
one.
50%
Yeah.
is what we're constituting? So it's just a majority then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do have a quorum.
Quorum's typically.
Typical.
Yeah.
Okay, approval of the minutes of May 17th, 2016. Does anybody have any changes, additions, or corrections? None. I'd take a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 17th, 2016. Everybody approve, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Agenda analysis. Does anybody have anything they want to add to the agenda or change the agenda? John?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have a discussion. It would be kind of a recap of the 2 joint meetings we had with the Planning Commission and to see if there's any takeaway for the TAC on that. Kind of explore that when we have the conversation.
Thank you. We'll put that in section 5B. Anything else from anybody? Bob?
Given, after our conversation with the Planning Commission and the non-decision that we made, 'cause I don't think we ever really arrived at any formal, airtight conclusion. It was a good conversation. I'm glad we got there. But, the more I think about it, I think we do, both parties have vaguely similar roles because we both deal with traffic. But the Planning Commission pretty much deals in a comprehensive way in terms of its relation to land use, where I think this body here pretty much deals with the everyday practical solutions to traffic as an advisory board. But I think that the majority of the decisions and statements that are made to us relates to traffic safety. And I would like to see, maybe later on after the summer when we've got a full board here, to discuss whether or not we could change that title from the Traffic Advisory to Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. That might be a mouthful, but put a little bit more emphasis on the safety factor, which would separate the 2 bodies and with the distinction in the roles that they play, which I think is important. I really do. And I think it would give this board a little bit more oomph than we've in the past enjoyed. But this safety program that we've initiated, I think is a good thing. And I think it sort of fits right in with the presumed role that we have. So anyway, if we don't have any objection, I would like to carry that on maybe when we start meeting in the fall. And just discuss it amongst us and find out if that's something that makes any sense or not. Because I do think that we ought to distinguish between the 2 roles and not make it so that we compete, because I don't think we compete, but make sure that in our titles, make sure that we don't. So that's my thought on that.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to citizen comments. We have 2 citizens tonight. Randall Ubeck And Roger Fowler Thies.
It was Randall, is that right?
Ronald.
Ronald.
My name is Roger Fowler Tice, resident Oregon City, and I'm here, basically here for a follow-up on the last meeting, and so I'll let Ron here go first, and he has more to say.
Well, anyway, I'm Ronald Urback, live on 149, as I refer to it, the Lynn Avenue Speedway. Anyway, I've lived here, last month was like 36 years, and that's a few minutes. Anyway, so it's just, the thing is, I mean, one thing, in 2012, I had a heart attack and a triple bypass, and, you know, this really, and I've got anxiety, and it really bothers me. You know, because the cars are going so fast, nobody can cross the street, it takes a long time to get out, because the thing is, people are coming down, up and down Lynn Avenue so fast, it's ridiculous, and it's not safe. And I've seen many times where, you know, people, you know, try, because I'm right across from Singer Creek Park, and, you know, people like to go walking in there, you know, and you have to wait for, you know, the traffic to be down enough to go across, and the problem is, you know, you don't know when somebody's going to come, you know, super fast, because I've talked, in fact, I've been talking to the police, the officers, about getting the digital trailer right across from my house to deter, you know, to slow them down a little bit. And I talked to I've talked to 3 of them so far. And yesterday I talked to an officer. He says it's in the works. He says it'll be there soon. And because like I said, I've been here a long time. I've seen the big change. You know, when I first moved up here, it was 35, but it was a country road. If you would see a car every 10, 15 minutes, that was a busy day. And then they lowered it to 25, which, you know, it's never been enforced. So anyway, so then probably I can't remember exactly, you know, the date, but it seems like about 8 years ago they raised it back up to 35, which is fine if it would be enforced. I don't care if they, you know, it was 45 if they enforce it, because even the police backed me up on this. I said, you know, see, I used to drag race, and I'm a very good judge. I can eyeball speed very accurately, and because they used to park the digital trailers, you know, across the street from my house. And the thing is, you know, I would just sit there and just kind of say, you know, okay, that car coming up the hills, you know, doing 45 miles an hour. The digital trailer was 42, so I'm a real good judge of speed, because I used to go fast in my race car. So anyway, a lot of fun. In fact, I'm getting back into it, so a little old, but I'm going for it anyway. But anyway, so then, you know, it's just not good, because you know, somebody's going to get hurt real bad, and you know, I hate to say that, but it's going to happen. And then, you know, another suggestion I made was where Charmin, okay, going up the hill, Charmin comes in. There's a painted crosswalk in there now. If they could put a stop sign there, I mean, how much would that cost? Nothing. I'd dig a hole, plant a pipe. And that would, you know, slow them down, because you'd be coming down the hill halfway. And then if they put one down across from Pearl on the uphill side, there again, it would slow everybody down, and it wouldn't cause any more congestion than there is now. It's just not safe. And you know, about 2 weeks ago, there's this woman that lives on in fact 2 houses from him on East Street. Yeah. And she was walking her baby over in the park, and she stood over there for at least 5 minutes. See, my shop's right next door to my house, and I was out there, you know, doing what I do. And I came out. I said, how long you been there? She goes, 2 or 3 minutes. I said, okay. You know, so I looked up, looked down. I stood in the middle of the street, put my hands up so she could come across the street and not get hit. And her baby's probably, you know, 6 months old. And, you know, that's not right. I mean, the park's meant to have fun, and if you can't go over there, what good is it? I mean, I used to walk over there pretty regularly. After I had the heart attack, they said, walk, you're going to get a lot better, you'll feel better. And yeah, but I don't go over there anymore because, you know, I mean, it takes 10 minutes to get across the street because nobody slows down. I have to go out there and, you know, make sure that nobody's coming before I would even think about it. And then to get my car out of there, you know, I mean, I have to, you know, you have to nose it out, you know, look, make sure nobody's coming, and, you know, hope nobody's going to come, because about 2 weeks ago, I pulled out, I was going down the hill, and this woman, I mean, there was nobody coming, you know, because I'm pretty careful about looking, and next thing I know, this woman's on my butt, she's flipping me off, she's mouthing, she's honking her horn, and she's, yeah. Anyway, next thing I knew, she's going around me, going to the center line, you know, and she was doing probably, I run 25, 30 miles an hour. That's, you know, that's fast enough, you know. And she just went around me like I was standing still. And there again, flipped me off and mouthing and beeping. You know, she wasn't real happy. You know, I thought maybe she should have left about 10 minutes early. She wouldn't have had to, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time for your friends' comments.
Well, I just.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You didn't get through your vibrations. Can you use some of my minutes? No? Okay. Well, okay. So, yeah. So Ron here has, he's got the worst of the vibrations going on. He's only about, 10 to 15 feet away from the road. Not even that. And, you know, I was in here a month ago, and we discussed this with you. And since then, you know, I've tried to do some research on it and talk to some people about some kind of a test equipment or to see, you know, what kind of vibrations are happening. And one of the neighbor I was talking to about this also said that he's just dealing with his house. He lives up on East Street, and he said that there's, as far as he knows, that hill is a possible slide. And I don't know how far down the slide would go. And so that's got us really nervous now, especially with these vibrations. And he didn't know what kind of substrate or what, I don't know the proper terms, but the substrate's under the road, how, you know, if it's from when it was originally built, and whether it can handle what it's handling right now. And what I looked up here is that I gave you a copy of this, sir, and so it says solutions and preventative strategies that have been suggested to reduce vibration to an acceptable level, including periodic maintenance of road surfaces, control of traffic flow and speed, and improvement of road structures, soil improvement. I'm sure you know all about this, but the speed is what they keep referring to here. And and I know that I was told that ODOT is partly responsible for the speed, but in talking to a few other people that were involved with when this first got raised back up to 35, there were several citizens that, including myself, that were kind of sort of really annoyed because there was no notification, as far as we knew, to our residents that the speed limit was going to be. And the neighbors on Lynn, you know, I'd asked them, and they said I had no idea it was 35, and it was probably 35 for 2 weeks before they didn't realize it. So
We went through that at some earlier meetings, and it was decided that the neighborhoods would be notified in the future.
Okay.
When such actions were being considered, and it's not required, but it's a courtesy that I think John has said that he would forward information to the
Right, I think that the key point isn't notice. It's although we did commit to that, it's really that speed limits aren't set typically based on community input. And I know that doesn't necessarily always fare well with the community who's wanting to set the limit at a particular rate. The state may consider some of that, but I don't know how much they weigh that in their decision. So we can give notice and we can let them know what's going, but I don't know that there's a requirement for public comment on something like that.
Well, at least we're taking a step toward notifying you when something like that is being studied or maybe
But I think
considered. But I think
for the committee, I think what we need to maybe share, because we've heard this issue for a couple of years now at least, and I know some of you, as long as some of you have been on the committee, put it that way. When because we have a pretty big sewer project that we're planning along that stretch of road. We've done some geotechnical analysis with that work, because we also included in that scope the addition of a more detailed analysis than what was done with the corridor plan. So if you remember, we did a corridor plan here recently, and that's been adopted and approved. The next step was to try to get a better handle on what the reality of that cost is, where we might need new walls or replacement of old walls, and how the driveways might play into that, because some of the driveways, especially on the downhill side, are really pretty steep. So to get a detailed topographic survey of that corridor, really from Sharman, is it Sharman? Sharman down the hill to 5th Street. So that work is underway right now, as well as the geotechnical work has at least the field work has been completed. We haven't seen the results from that, but again, we're working with the consultant to get that concept plan. Where would the edge of the road be? Does it need new alignment? Does it need a new road section to help with some of this vibration? And at the end of the day, we'd hopefully have a smoother road than what we have today. Whether there's landslide activity in that area or not, we haven't heard that yet, but it's in a very steep canyon, so it wouldn't surprise me. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think the city is taking steps to get to, a longer term solution. But part of the reason why we needed to do the concept plan was because the city really doesn't have the kind of funding we're talking about to rebuild that roadway and to place the walls that we're talking about, and to get the lane configurations that makes it safer for pedestrians up and down that corridor, is not complete. But what we know is, once that 30% design is complete, we're going to have to go out and compete for funding for that. And that's we know these folks, you haven't, but these folks have heard regional funding for a project of that size is very competitive, right? We're competing with the region for that, and sometimes we're competing with across the state for those limited dollars. So it takes time to get through the progress. I felt like it made more sense to do a speed study, or ask the state to redo the speed study once we have done more of the design work. But maybe it just makes sense to do that if they will do that. It hasn't been that long since they did it last, but we can make the request. My guess is it's going to be lower on their priority list. Keep in mind, the last time the speed limit was increased to 35 from 25, it was a decision, that was a recommendation by the state, and we could have scrutinized that more. I wasn't involved in that when that decision was made, but we have the ability to scrutinize their recommendation, and that's probably where we need to be, and that's probably where the public involvement would come into play.
Well, if they recommended 35, and we looked at it very, very carefully, and decided that for our purposes and for the betterment of the neighborhood, or whatever you might want to call it, we could lower it to, say, 30.
We could recommend. They make the decision. We
I
could,
see. So
we can make the
ours would
request.
strictly be a advisory.
It would be a request.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think, to me, it makes sense to go ahead and reach out to the state again and figure out if first of all, if there's been sufficient time to come back, or sufficient change. There hasn't been much change up there, to be honest with you. So, has there been sufficient time for them to come back and take another look at it, knowing how much community kind of outcry?
But they have a different decision maker too.
Yeah, I don't think they have. I don't think they've changed that particular person.
Can I make a response?
Yes.
I know your frustration. If I was sitting in your seat, try sitting in these seats here.
Oh, I
Two things that I've noticed since I've been with the city, on both the planning commission level and on the TAC, is resources are limited. If money was no question, and if personnel was no question, then the only thing you have to deal with is time and the political will to do it. We got 10,000 different requests coming at you, and the number one request is traffic control. And this city manages thousands upon thousands of traffic vehicle trips per day, none of them going to Oregon City, they're going through Oregon City. And that woman that probably flipped you off probably lives someplace in the county, and she should have got started a half hour early. Really, So, it's not as if we're not listening. We are. But where's the money coming from? Really, tens of millions of dollars to fix that. And then you get into the question, is if we fix that, it's permanent for the next 50, 100 years, and it turns into a highway. You see, and I mean, there's a lot of thinking that goes in on these things, but the number one thing is the limitations of personnel and money. We can come to the right conclusion and decision. We think now is the right decision, but where do you get the money to engage all this stuff? It's I hate to say it really is complicated. It's not because we don't want to. It's just that, just layer upon layer of decision making goes along with this. And I understand what you're saying about trying to get across a dumb highway. Why can't I cross the highway? There's got to be an answer to that.
Right.
And you think we went to the moon, but we can't get across the highway. Jeez.
There's some good news when we do the sewer project. Traffic's going to come to a screeching halt in that street. So there'll be at least a period of time when we're working on that. And
What's the target date for the sewer project?
it's not out to bid yet, so I don't have a good schedule. But later this summer, late summer, we'll probably start that project, and it's going to take some time.
And it's from, what are the north-south ends of the project?
It's near Mr. Did you say it was Urbach? 149 Lynn. It's almost smack dab in front of your house, and then it goes down the street to the other.
Can't get out of your garage?
To the other side of Pearl.
I can't get out now, so I guess it's not going to be a whole lot of difference in it.
Pearl doesn't get as far as Fifth Street then?
Doesn't go all the way to 5th Street. I think it gets about halfway. I think it goes near 4th. You recollect? Okay.
I got it right here.
I want to say
Makes it down to about Oak.
I think there's like 1,600 feet of sewer there that we've got to replace.
Can I ask a quick question, Bob? That lady that took her 5 minutes to cross the street, the lady with the stroller, was she at a marked crosswalk?
But I understand that if if there's no traffic and you step out into it, you're supposed to stop.
I think the law is that if you don't have to have a corner or a crosswalk, that if you step out into the street, the traffic is the law that they have to stop.
I think the Oregon state law states that if somebody's crossing at a location other than a marked or unmarked crosswalk, in other words, jaywalking, they need to yield to cars. So they should wait at the side of the road till the traffic clears. But then if they stepped into the road and somebody's driving along, then due care they would stop for the pedestrian. But Do you recall what time of day that was?
I think it was about probably about 1 maybe 1:30. Yeah. Can I say something?
Sure.
The thing is, one thing is that, there's so much vibration in my house. My foundation is cracking. I mean, see, I've got like a half a basement, and then the main floor is, because I'm on the high side of Lynn. And in the main part of I guess the main part of the house is up a ways. And the thing is, it started out when see my stairway goes up the center of the house, up to the main floor, and it started when they started. Well, the buses just shook my house. I mean, like an earthquake. I swear to it. Anyway, and the thing is, about 2/3 of the way up the stairs, it's a cement stairway and cement walls on the side, and it started out just with little hairline cracks, and within 6 months, I mean, they've opened up on one side 5/8 of an inch and 1/2 inch on the other, and that makes me real nervous. I'm afraid my house is going to end up in the center of the road. And over all the doorways down the basement in the foundation, all the doorways, they're cracked. Over the windows, they're spidering out from there. And then I've got like a single car garage, in the, if you're looking at the house, it'll be on the left-hand side. And there's a walk-through door, from the half a basement into that. And the frame, it has separated probably 3/4 of an inch on the top, and maybe because it's going like this. So it's opened up quite a bit on the bottom. I mean on the top, and the house is built in '32. It's got mortar and lath. Every place you look, it's cracked, and it's every time the buses go by, I feel a boom. And then maybe 50 feet again, boom, and then another one, boom, in front of my shop. And then up the hill, because the Iron Rock Apartments are next door, and they've got the city put a fire hydrant there, recessed it, in the hillside on the high side, and there's 3 metal lids right there, and that's like 100 feet up, from my property line on the side. When it hits that, boop, boop, boop.
Well, then when that sewer project goes in, there'll be some repaving done, right?
Yep.
So if there's ruts there that are causing those booms, then that may solve that problem somewhat anyway. But
it's,
like Bob said,
Well, if I'm just hearing that, we did a project not too long ago where we had to abandon an old water line and reconnect all the water services to a parallel line. I don't know. We could look at the trenches to see if there's a problem with the trenches there somehow, resulting in a dip or something like that. I think we can look at that. Sometimes these structures get a little bit beyond our ability to evaluate because lots of times they are old. We don't have any clue about, without doing more kind of invasive testing, it's hard to determine. But if it'd be worth us taking a look at your stairway or wherever the recent cracking is. Again, it's hard to draw a conclusion between a crack in a foundation and a bus travel, but be interesting to experience. So I think we'll schedule something that we can get by and take a look at that.
Well, then let's leave it right there, because I know John. I've seen him in action, and he'll follow up with you.
All right.
Believe me. So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's see. Item 5, new business discussion items, Public Works report. John.
Well, I think Martin's carrying the lion's share of this because I think isn't the first item about the drive safe Oregon City. You want to talk a little bit about distribution and where we're at with that? I did bring these, Martin. I don't know if you have these, but I know everybody's seen these, but that's kind of real size and real.
So that's the finished product? Did we get them back from the printers?
It should
No.
be in by the end of the week. I think.
That's just
Okay.
a test one, but I brought it just because I had it on my desk.
Yeah. I know I was talking to Lisa, and she was hoping maybe they'd get in today, but That was a big hope on her part, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, did before I forget to ask you, of course, we don't have Steve Johnson here or Henry, but there were some letters that were submitted last meeting, evidently, and we can't find those. I
Yeah, she
was just
called me
thinking
about
these
that,
three
and
might-
I remember I had passed them on to Henry.
Actually, can I get these?
Yeah.
And I can put these into the record.
Yeah,
Thank you.
especially if there's phone numbers there, Martin.
That's one thing I make sure of after every meeting is I give those sheets to Lisa so she can get those in the record.
Well, I guess since Henry and Steve aren't here, Bob, if you could look in your past, it was letters about this, right?
Right, yeah.
It was about this Lynn Avenue thing.
Yeah.
Somebody submitted to the record, and
And I'll double check my stuff, but I went through it real carefully.
do we know if either of these two were the ones that submitted those?
Roger
one
was
of them
one of
was.
them, and then there was another gentleman who's not here today who was.
We can follow up with Roger too.
Yeah.
So last month we'd gone over kind of a distribution strategy for the Drive Safe Oregon City placards, and I'd shared with you just a preliminary map that we'd put together for one of the neighborhoods. So we've completed a GIS analysis of each of the neighborhoods. So what you have here is a map representing each of the registered neighborhood associations. So we have a set number of how many decals each of the neighborhoods is going to get. So at the high end, McLaughlin gets 195. At the low end, Kanema neighborhood gets 15. So realizing there are a limited number of resources, what's the best strategy for trying to get these to the general public? So when we give these to the neighborhood associations, they're put to good use. So we did a GIS analysis that basically said target residential properties. Okay, so we removed all of the commercial properties and all of the multifamily residential properties. Typically, if it's an apartment complex, they've got a large dumpster, same thing with a commercial property. So that was the first tier. Second tier was target areas that are on a arterial or collector road or greater. So if you're in a small residential neighborhood on the very far back end of a far end of a town, are you the best candidate, or is it trying to target some of the more heavily trafficked roads, for the roads that we get the most complaints about? So with those two criteria, we came up with these maps. These maps all have a follow-up report that has all of the names, addresses, contact information for each of these properties. So we're prepared to give that over to the neighborhood associations when we meet with them, with a couple guidelines that we'll kind of codify in a little handout. The first and really the only requirement that we're going to ask with these is wherever these go, we need to know the address for two reasons. The first being we want to know where they're at so that we're not wasting resources and getting placards out to the same household every year. So figure out what's our level of saturation. Second being, eventually when you start getting enough saturation out there, there could be the potential for some follow-up speed analysis that says the speed on this road was such and such prior to the slowdown campaign. We've had this in place now for a few years. We know that roads that have a certain percentage of these seem to have a drop in speeding. So that's why we want to have the where these went to. It's not Big Brother trying to keep an eye out. It's so that we can do follow-up analysis. So other than that, the only other guidance that we're going to have for the neighborhood associations is utilize these maps, but try and sparse these out. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do a cluster at only one street. Rather than do every house back to back on an entire street, maybe skip every other house. But try and sparse them out a little bit so that there is some coverage. We'll also provide the contact information for the printer, so if any of the neighborhood associations wants to do a separate buy, they'll be able to do that on their own. and all the files will be with the printing company that they can coordinate with on their own. So this is basically next month. I believe we'll be ready to take this out to the street. You'll have the full guidance, you'll have the maps, and then we'll have the placards in hopefully by the end of this week or next week. It's ready to go. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Suggestion, there may be some youth civic groups like Boy Scouts who might partner with the neighborhood association and make it a service project and get out there on a Saturday and, you know, just with a couple of adult leaders and just hit every third house or something based on the ones on the maps, you know.
Yeah, the only
I don't know.
difficulty with that is where the individuals are keeping their trash bin. So
Pardon me?
where the individual households are keeping their trash bins. So if they've got them behind a fence or something, like mine's in my backyard behind my fence, so getting the service group access to those trash bins so they can put the placards out.
Oh, I was thinking they'd just hand it out to them.
Oh, handing them out. That'd be a good
Not
approach.
put them
yeah.
on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think, wouldn't that be something that information we'd pass on to the neighborhood association for them to contact?
Yeah.
The Boy
they,
Scouts rather than-
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of if you wanted to do a canvassing approach to try to make it one or two efforts to make a big hit and have an impact. I don't think you can do it just with active people in the neighborhood association. Maybe you can, but
Some of them are so inactive that,
Yeah,
like for
so-
example, Gaffney Lane, poor Amy has been running that for years now, and she hardly ever gets any help. Maybe PTAs, although we're getting to the end of the school year now, we are at the end of the school year, so they're not active.
I think go with the neighborhood associations, and then if they come back and say we need assistance with trying to get these out, then we can go to
Yeah,
a second tier
that's-
approach
I think
with a
that's
service
the-
group or.
okay.
So we did. The McLaughlin neighborhood came to us and wanted to be kind of the
Wanted to be the pilot project.
wanted to be
on
the
them all.
pilot project, and they do have the most stickers and clearly the most streets in which you might
Mhm.
post something like this. And they're the most active.
Yeah.
Bob. This is really committee. We can provide, information so that they can log where they're at, because I think that's key. These are good guidance, right? But if somebody goes, hey, I'm not on the map and I want one, and it makes sense, then that kind of
Sure.
direction could be given. But there's a tendency to not say no to people when they want one of these, and they may be in a dead end street for all we know. And so, it would be good to watch the McLaughlin neighborhood and see how they handle it, and let them, if they want to use Boy Scouts or whoever. I think that's a great idea. Girl Scouts too, by the way. But I just kind of wonder if we shouldn't
Start with
honor
one.
that McLaughlin neighborhood request. The only thing I would say is it'd be great if by the start of the school year, we kind of have these all distributed and kind of in place and have it hopefully becoming effective.
Well, most of the neighborhood associations have a July meeting. That's their general meetings. Some of them have, of course, in between those, they have steering committee meetings. But, I agree, we should fulfill our commitment to the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, but I
They
don't
may
want
not
us-
need much of a lead either. It may just be but I think I thought it was nice of them to say, hey, we'll test this for you.
And the maps, they're not a rule, more of just a tool, just to kind of help them with some sort of targeted approach. If somebody wants to ask them and say, hey, I want one, and they're not on the map, there's nothing precluding one of those residents from getting one. We just thought it would be kind of a helpful approach for them to take.
This placard goes on the garbage. How big is it? About like that?
He's got them.
They're not huge, but they're enough.
And how many of these do we have?
I don't remember the totals, Bob.
15
I don't remember the totals.
It's about 1,000. We
You'll-
paid for 500, and then B&B paid for another 500.
Another 500. That's right. B&B Leasing, I guess we need to remember that they Their logo, or at least part of their logo, is on the sticker as well. And yeah, I thought that was pretty nice of them to, first of all, allow us to put them on the garbage can and then sponsor 50% of that.
Another thing that we could do is, if we get these out by July to the general membership, each of the committees, just tell them any of them that aren't distributed by September, please let us know, because there are other neighborhoods that may be able to distribute them, and then we can kind of move them about to where there is demand. So if we do have an inactive neighborhood association that it really isn't getting them put out, then we'll ask them just get them back.
Well, the inactive ones are being represented by active ones. They're encouraging their neighborhoods to kind of merge with their meetings and stuff. So that can be worked around. But yeah, we want to be sure to get them all out there. Now, my next question is, where do we go from here? What is our next step? We get the signs. Then how do we approach the neighborhood associations? I mean, I personally would be more than happy to take signs out, the allotted number of signs, to the Park Place Neighborhood Association, which I'm the chair of, and one or two others. But I think to get good coverage, I think the rest of the members of the TAC would be good to have the rest of them go out to certain neighborhoods and take the signs out and give the presentation of what the project is all about. So
I was making a point, I think most, unless you took it to the CIC and this has been discussed with all the neighborhood associations, most neighborhood associations will be surprised by this, right? They don't know what's happening.
no, they've all been known that this been notified months
John's
ago
spoken
that this was coming
to the
on.
neighborhoods at CIC about the campaign.
Okay.
I've gone to every one of those
Okay.
neighborhood associations and explained the upcoming traffic safety
Okay, good.
plans.
Good.
So,
Doesn't matter how many conversations you have with neighborhoods, people are surprised.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean there may be, and whether they're ready to take it on this summer. We haven't been real clear about when we'd roll this out, other than we kind of wanted it before the school year. So it's going to take some hand-holding. I would agree with that. And I think McLaughlin neighborhood has a meeting that I kind of wanted to get to, but they've moved their meetings to the same night as the city commission meeting now. So it'd be nice to have some coverage there with somebody who is willing to go through the program. And
Well, I was going to volunteer myself for Park Place and McLaughlin.
I'll do the same thing for Rivercrest.
Let's start making a list.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think we're overlooking a group that really has some really good impact on the community, and that's our churches. If you were to get up and ask the pastor to announce, however they do it, I know over at St. John's right after Mass they have the announcements, and just indicate that City of Oregon City is engaged in a traffic safety program, and in the back there's some information, and we ask you to participate. That stuff would disappear in a minute. It really would. And people would take that stuff with them, and they would be notified right there by the person they pay attention to, their pastor or their priest. They pay attention to those guys. And I think it would have some real positive, immediate impact. Really. I really do.
I
So if you could get some leverage.
I don't disagree. It could be a good way. I think part of the problem is, we only have, sounds like 1,000 of these. We need them to be distributed in an orderly way so that they're most effective. At least that's our thought. And, I think we've got a good plan here. Somehow we got to make sure whoever's taking that sticker, people take stickers. How they use them and whether they put them on, do they live on the right street? That's the hard part. So the churches, people could live outside the city.
That's true.
And so that's why I thought we were targeting the neighborhoods, Bob.
Yeah.
And especially those that are active and willing.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd target with the neighborhood associations, just because we do have an idea of where they'll be going.
Sure,
But they're-
sure.
I don't have concerns about getting a call about somebody's car got graffitied with one of these stickers on their windshield on the side of their car, that they're going to be used for the purpose they were intended for,
Yeah,
because we knew
yeah.
where they went, and
Yeah.
these people, we got their name and their phone number, and we knew that they were going to be putting them out at the proper location.
Would anybody else have a desire to help us in this distribution to the neighborhoods?
I can help you in Park Place.
Okay.
Somebody said Rivercrest. Who's that? Did you say Rivercrest, Bob?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will be attending the CIC meeting, so any neighborhoods that you don't want to directly go to, we can go to that, or Martin can,
I can get Gaffney Lane and Caulfield. I'll be attending a couple of road meetings coming up soon.
Gaffney Lane and what?
Caulfield.
There's a contact information for both.
Oh. Did we do
So
one?
Martin, I have a quick question here. I'm just looking at Hazel Grove. You look at that,
Mm-hmm.
and I see where you got the gray with the dots are the major collector streets, right?
Let me bring up the map. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the spreadsheet. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I'm looking at, there's a major street all the way around the perimeter there, Central Point.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of individual lots that maybe they back up to Central Point. That's why they're not colored red.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand why.
Yeah, so we did an aerial analysis as well. So if a house backs up to a collector but doesn't, if they don't have a means to put their trash out on that collector, then we took them off the list.
Okay.
There's also, we did an analysis, if you live in a neighborhood where you've got alleys and your predominant trash pickup is on that alleyway, we took those off the list as well, because no one's really going to see them to try and deter
Right,
speeding
right.
if it's on an alley pickup.
Let me put it this way. We have some people that are not in attendance this evening. If they watch this video of this meeting, or if any of the rest of you want to help in a particular neighborhood, contact me. Otherwise, I'll take the responsibility to get them out to the rest of the neighborhoods. I've already done it once. I'll do it again.
Do you want to come to the CIC meeting?
Yes, I will.
Okay. And I'll support you in whatever way you want. But again, I mean, we were kind of hoping that this would be, kind of a tack handoff.
Yeah.
Great.
And again, just because a property is not depicted in red doesn't mean don't give them a sticker. It was trying to give some sort of guidance and a tool as to where are you most likely going to get your best bang out of your buck.
Yeah, I love these maps you got,
Yeah,
Martin. These are
nice
just
map.
great. Wonderful.
That's our stellar GIS department. It's not me.
Yeah, but it was your idea, wasn't it?
No.
They would have done it with nobody's idea.
Team effort.
Give me a
So
break.
this is GIS,
Mhm.
but isn't it associated with IT? You got
Well,
they have to talk to each other.
our IT department and our GIS department, to some extent,
Are the same.
are interchangeable.
Well, that's what
Although
impresses.
Chris Dunlop and,
Yeah.
and Katie
England.
England are pretty much our GIS department.
That impresses me, how they taken what we've got here, started with, and it ended up with this kind of stuff.
It impresses me too.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're a very impressive little work group. Martin, I think we probably need a log sheet so that whoever gets the stickers
Yep.
can log where they're at, and we can get with
We're gonna have a little
with
registry
return
sheet.
address or something.
Yeah. And then we'll also have instructions that'll tell you how to put your placard, where to put your placard on your trash can. Because you don't want to put it on the front or where the grips are going to pick up your trash can, because then it's just a waste of money.
Now, are these placards glue the kind that once you get it on there,
It's on
no
there.
matter what, so you got to get it right the first time.
That's the hope.
Okay.
But again, this isn't NASA. We're not trying to put a man in space, so
Yeah.
even if it's a little cattywampus, it's okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Those little brochures that Lisa put out too. I think whenever we hand brochures too, that helps.
How many of those do we have, John?
Well, those we can print as many as we need. Those aren't on a sticker form. That's
Just 8.5 by 11. that
they're
we
just the
print out.
cost of our printing.
Should start doing that. I would say when we go to the neighborhood associations, if we have 20 of those brochures, it should cover everybody in most of the neighborhood association meetings. Of course, Park Place had a meeting with 67, 68 people in attendance the other night, but that was highly unusual, very specific subject.
Was that about annexation?
Yes, it was. Boy, it was a hot night with a hot topic. But it went well. It went very well. Okay, are we through with the sticker
Yep.
part? The TAC bylaws review, is that the next one?
Yeah. So in the packet,
Revisions, I mean?
Lisa and Martin, I think, have there's been some discussion. It must have been at a meeting I wasn't at about the bylaws, and I kind of read through the discussion and agree that we needed to make some adjustments to the bylaws, but it's minor unless you're starting to talk a little bit more about kind of the purpose. And so we've included those. I think it's open, Bob, for you to lead the discussion about, if there's more ideas about bylaw changes, and
Well, I think that just after I became chair, I suggested that it become a 2-year term for the officers, because your first year you kind of get used to what's going on, and then by the second year, while you're up and running. And I recall John making the statement, well, once the guy gets in power, look what he wants. He wants it all. So. But anyway, we're approaching the end of my 2nd-year term, and we still haven't changed it in the actual bylaws itself. So I think this is just a formality of.
Well, there's 2 things that we need to follow up with. So Lisa was able to follow up with the city recorder's office and get confirmation that for official change of the bylaws, you do need to get it approved by city commission. So
Okay.
that's an item that we'll have to bring back to them. We've spoken to the recorder's office, and they'll be fine anytime before October, and you shouldn't have any problems.
Okay.
So plenty of time to get that done.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we were concerned with, would a change of the bylaws affect any of the terms for the officers? Because that's the big change from the last change of bylaws that we put in together last December. So it shouldn't affect any of the terms of the officers or any of the tenures of the members of the committee. So again, you can still get all this done prior to October.
Yeah.
So what we can do is put something together to get it loaded onto a city commission agenda sometime after July. If we don't have a July meeting, then we can try and get it loaded in August or early September.
Okay.
That's for the changes that you've already put together from last December. Any other changes is something that if you're going to do it, you probably want to plan to get it all done in one foul swoop.
right, rather not have to continue to go back to the city commission for another little adjustment.
Right.
So,
Well, then, I've suggested everybody take these bylaws, look them over, and since we're not going to supposedly not have July or August meeting, how would we communicate our desire for changes and then have a consensus till September? Unless we had a special meeting.
I'm not responding to that. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, because you have 2 sets of changes under officers and staffing. you change the 1-year term to 2 years, and then you delete the no person shall serve as an officer in the same position for more than 2 consecutive years. So you could have 2-year terms, so a person could serve 4 or 6, 3 2-year terms in a position. I'm not against that. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the intent here. By eliminating that last line,
Oh,
no person shall serve, it opens the door for a person to serve multiple years, multiple terms, multiple years. And I mean, I'm not against that. I'm just,
2 after 2 after 2, or
Yeah,
2
yeah.
and then they can be gone and then come back. And
no,
then
2 after 2 after 2. It doesn't
Yeah, but
require
the way
a
it's
break.
written right now, it's 2, and if nobody wants to be an officer, you can run it indefinitely if you're willing to get the votes and do the work.
I mean, I don't have.
I mean, I'm comfortable with that. I mean,
That person still needs to get.
elected each 2
Like,
years,
yeah,
every
so-
2 years. So you have,
We haven't had a problem with that, I guess. I mean, I want to say Blaine was on for. He's probably our longest running. Well, maybe no.
I think
maybe
he was-
Don.
he
Maybe
was for
Don
2
Slack.
years.
Was it just
Yeah,
2
because
years?
before it was a 1-year term, and you couldn't complete more than 2 terms. So
I mean,
he was reelected after his first year for another year.
what else would we want to change besides those 2 things?
Well,
You know, we had that last meeting with the planning commission, kind of touched a little bit regarding the, how we work with them, but I don't know if that.
well, I think that there should be a limit of how many terms a chair and vice chair would be able to serve. Because there are limits, I think, if not all, most of the other committees, there are term limits for the mayor and the commissioners. Of course, we're talking about much longer terms, but
well, the way you would address that, given this, the top of page 2 then on these bylaws, instead of deleting that whole sentence, you would just change one word, instead of
Years to
saying
terms.
consecutive years, say 2 consecutive terms. That means the person could serve for 4.
yeah.
Or you could change it to 3 consecutive terms if you want to just have a little bigger cap on it.
I think 2 is plenty myself, personally.
The only problem I see is we don't have a whole stampede of people wanting to serve on these committees.
I understand that.
You know?
Or serve as the chair on that committee
Yeah,
once they
yeah,
get
yeah.
on it.
So once you got them, you better keep them. I don't have any problem with 3 terms, but 4 might be stretching it. But I think 2 is kind of a, you get a person up and running at speed, and all of a sudden his term's up, and you got to be looking around for somebody that isn't there.
I'd recommend that instead of deleting that last sentence that's in red, on the top of page 2, we change the word 2 to 3, and we change the word years to terms. And that gives us a potential for someone to serve 6 years. If they want to do it and the committee wanted them to do it, that's fine, but not more than 6.
Yeah, I like
I,
that.
I like that too.
Okay, do we need a motion?
I'll make a motion to,
I'll second it, whatever you're going to say.
yeah, that we change the top of page 2 to 3 consecutive terms.
Do we have to define term?
No,
It's a
the
two-
term is 2
It's
years.
already,
I think.
it's already defined.
Yes.
Yeah.
Defined in the sentence
Earlier
number
in
1
that
of the same
paragraph,
paragraph.
yeah.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay.
Call the question then?
Yes. Anybody Is everybody in agreement?
You call for a
Aye.
vote?
Call for a vote, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But hands.
Vote of
Yeah.
hands, everybody in approval, aye.
Okay, there
Okay.
we go.
Bob, could I bring up one other possible change or
Yeah.
question on this?
Yeah.
In Article 4A, it's a procedure I have really never understood is why you have the nomination of officers in October and then voting in November. It seemed like most boards approve a new chairman in January when they have their new members on board. And to me, it would seem kind of awkward, if you will, if we're going to elect somebody as chairman for 2 years when their term is expiring in 2 months. So I was like to throw open having the election of the chairman and vice chairman in January when we have all the new members on board.
I want to say the reason is because those first couple of meetings, you kind of lose effect of those first couple of meetings in January. If you know someone's not going to, take another term, then hopefully the committee would know enough about that not to elect them to that position. And then we have November. Can't remember if we meet in December, but then in January the chair then knows that they're the chair and they're kind of geared up for that next year's year of service. So I think
Personally,
that's why it
to
happened.
me, that felt more comfortable than just all of a sudden you're the chair.
Yeah, if we know Bob's moving on and he's become somebody more
Normal old
spectacular
guy.
than he already is and wants to move on, then we wouldn't, you as a group wouldn't
Right.
elect him as a.
Plus, the chair-elect then has the month of December to meet with staff to get up to speed and check whatever kind of mechanics or procedures you want to
Right.
emphasize.
So it is a little clunky. It's kind of like regular elections, right? You get elected, and then you take office in January, I think.
I think, though, that this committee only recommends those people that will be reappointed to the committee.
That's true.
It's actually the commission that has to appoint them, and that takes place in January.
That's true. That's true. So that happens after the first meeting in January usually, or about the same time, depending on how on top of that the new mayor is. I mean, the mayor is the one who appoints the members. Doesn't appoint the officers, right?
Right, but he just saying if someone's term is ending, they want to serve again, they tell us in October that they're willing to serve and they're willing to be a candidate for chair, even though they have to have their term, they have to be reappointed in January by the mayor. So you're kind of hanging out there.
That's true.
That, I don't think it's tripped us up so far, but it's
No, I don't
kind of
think-
awkward.
For all practical purposes, the odds of that happening are pretty rare.
I think
We could sit here all night long and talk about possibilities.
Right, we haven't really had a problem with this, I guess, unless as far as I recall, but there's always a first.
Yeah. I'd encourage we stay the way that part is myself.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Were you going to talk about that neighborhood traffic management plan at all? Because that's a possible change too. In the bylaws here, we talk about this
Yeah.
neighborhood traffic management plan,
Yeah.
which I think the transportation system plan, and we've not necessarily seen that. I did talk to Nancy Crushauer, and she couldn't recall it either. We had a couple of staff members that she thought maybe way back when really even before my time, so that would have been 12 years ago. They may have had some kind of a plan, but it was more like internal, and they staff.
Maybe we ought to let the other
the
members
tax that
know
time.
what we're talking about here. Article 2A,
Right.
the last line states, land use matters relevant to the city of Oregon City, as well as guide preparation of transportation plans and programs. And this is the part, including the neighborhood traffic management plan. And no staff nor I have been able to find any reference at all to a neighborhood traffic management plan. And so, if it ever existed, it's way, way beyond anybody else's knowledge. And the traffic plan that we have as a whole covers, traffic management plan covers.
Yeah, I mean, our
Neighborhoods.
transportation system plan says where arterials are, where collectors are, where residential streets are. So we use that. The transportation system plan also suggests where bike lanes would be, whether they're there now or not. Pedestrian walkways.
What would the neighborhood management, traffic management plan include that transportation system plan doesn't?
Well, that's just it. I'm not sure that there's much
Are we
more
talking?
to
Are we
include.
talking about the, like speed bumps in neighborhoods? Are we talking about bump outs in the streets as a calming devices? I mean, what are we talking? I mean, in reality, the transportation system plan wouldn't
Wouldn't
show
touch
the-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wouldn't necessarily provide that detail.
it doesn't get that to the level, and that's what neighborhoods sometimes typically complain about: people speeding.
Yeah.
There's no parking, so and I mean they come here for those things.
Yeah.
So maybe if there is, maybe
Maybe there's
something
a deficiency.
existed. If something existed, then we could point people to those things,
Yeah.
and it would simplify sometimes some of those discussions.
We could better establish where we put the radar signs, for instance.
I mean, there's a
Better
lot of
location.
stuff that, I have seen people come here, and if we had something like that, then I think it would be helpful. Even this stuff could go in there.
Well, I think if we wish to pursue establishing a neighborhood traffic management plan, we would have to establish an ad hoc committee to put some time into researching and developing standards. I don't think we, as a whole committee, would have the time to put into putting something like that together.
I think perhaps the first step would be to, or could be, and I don't want to have your staff have any more work, but perhaps Lisa could just check the internet, see if there's any other cities in Oregon or elsewhere that have neighborhood traffic management plans. And then you could find some examples of what they are. It seemed like I've heard that term before,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure where that the plan applied to.
I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think to do a traffic management plan, again, not knowing what's in it worries me a little bit about what.
No, I
kind of
didn't say we
workload-
do it. We
Yeah.
have that in the bylaws, and then
Yeah.
it's just I just have seen people come here, and it's kind of a lot of
Well,
those things.
A good example of this was Denise McGriff brought it up, and you look at it, and none of us can say what it is, which is a little bit embarrassing. We're supposed to be in charge of our own destiny, so to speak, here on the TAC, and we don't know something that's in the bylaws.
Wouldn't be
I
the
agree
first
with-
time a group didn't know what's in its bylaws.
I think
yeah.
having staff check with the other metro area cities, see if somebody's got one, or some of the other major cities, see if they've got a neighborhood plan. You have to be big enough to have subdivisions. I think that's, I mean, a subdivided city into neighborhoods like that. I mean, if you're a town of 2,200 like St. Paul, you probably don't have a neighborhood plan.
I think once we had that, it'd give us a better understanding what kind of work plan we needed to actually, create an Oregon City neighborhood, or whether it was even really attainable given the amount of time we have to dedicate to something like that.
Would the League of Oregon Cities be a good source to find that out?
They could be. There's a couple of, I think the T2 Center Metro may have something, so there's some sources that we could pursue.
Okay, well, as often, we'll leave it in staff's hands.
City of Salem, Sandy has something similar.
Yeah.
They call it Neighborhood Traffic Management Program.
Maybe they're in the same. Maybe they're in the same spot we are. Who knows?
City of Salem
Wouldn't that
has Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. City of Vancouver, Washington has one.
There you go.
They are out there.
Half our work is done.
Good.
I don't know how detailed, or this is just a 30,000 foot quick search.
I can have Dana Webb do a. Dana Webb is our project engineer for mostly transportation stuff. Have her drill down into that.
Okay, good. The next one is our meetings with the Planning Commission and what we got out of those meetings in regard to the TAC working with the Planning Commission. John, I'll ask you to head up that.
Well, I kept trying to picture the interface between the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission, and what functions they have and what functions we have. And we've got the big TSP, right, that we do every 10 years. And then they've got the comprehensive plan that includes areas that are to be annexed. So looking at Park Place, for example, we have 2 annexations coming up. We have a concept plan that constitutes most of that. And if a developer comes in and asks for a reduction in lot size, which could be a conditional use, or Planning Commission may approve that as part of after the negotiations, then he's going to increase the traffic. You could say, was the TSP's traffic for Holcomb based on the concept plan and the number of units and number of cars? And if it was, they hit that trigger then when they reduced the lot size and allowed more cars when they approved the subdivisions. And when that happens, if there's multiple areas coming in, is it simply developer first come, first served to see if they can, so if you had 2,400 units that were coming in the concept plan, and the first developer came in, he was dealing with 200 of the 2,400, and he said, I'd like to add 50 units to that. And if each one does that, it's going to increase the traffic flow that was originally in the concept plan and in the TSP. And is somebody rechecking the TSP's capacity to handle that? I don't know. I mean, nobody's ever come here in the 3 years I've been here and said, yeah, we just approved these 2 major developments. We gave them higher density. That added 60 units total. And maybe the Planning Commission and the staff at that point say, we need an additional traffic analysis and you're going to have to pay for traffic signals now that you've got. But it just all seems like it's a first come, first serve. It doesn't look like it's necessarily coordinated. So I'm just trying, there may be other things out there that are similar, but that's one I could think of. So, I mean, my looking at the Planning Commission's operation is they're probably going to know, or the staff serving them is going to know, whether or not a developer is asking for a change in density and whether that change in density is going to increase traffic counts. And then it comes down, maybe it's all at staff level, and the staff level says, well, you know, we got more than enough capacity in the long-term plan for Holcomb Boulevard, so we don't have to do anything extra. But then you get into the whole question of phasing. Now you hear some of these people saying, well, yeah, you do 2/3 of the development, and then finally you get enough SDCs or other things to fix the road, but that's 10 years after they've been congested because you had to have the road fixed simultaneously with the growth, and it wasn't happening. I don't know.
You sound like a county administrator and a planner. That's what you sound like.
Well, I'm just trying to
I know.
figure out how that might be coordinated,
I
or
know.
if
I
those
know.
kind of triggers actually occur. Because I was looking at, and Bob knows the numbers, the recent development that went in adjacent to Holcomb School. It was, I believe, all 10,000 square foot lots, so I assume the capacity impact on the roads was based on that.
Yes.
But the developer came in and asked for significantly less than that. After multiple meetings and negotiation, I think he added 2 or 3 additional units to the original
2.
number that were going to be there. So that's not much of an impact. But that's an example of a developer negotiating. If someone had said yes, and he would have got 10 more units, and then each subsequent developer just doing 20 lots gets 10 more units, it has a cumulative impact, and so.
But how do we come into that
Well,
theme anyways?
I guess we look at it and say, you can't do it because there's not enough money to put in the improvements on Holcomb to handle the additional traffic, unless we get some money up front to fix it. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, I assume the TSP and the systems development charges are tied together, and you have consultants come in, they look at what you need, and that's what you base your TSP on and your improvements. But they don't necessarily happen in a nice sequence, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely. I think there's a real disconnect between the analysis that goes into your transportation system plan, because that does looks at build out, looks at current conditions, and then looks at build out, right? And that's based on a lot of factors. Land use densities is one of them, but I know there's, like any other calculation, there's some factor of conservatism in that covers those, subdivisions that are 10,000 foot lot subdivisions, but they're getting approved for R8, for instance.
Yeah, right.
So the TSP, I'm confident at build out includes that. Now at build out, the build out analysis assumes all these improvements are done, right? A certain amount of improvements get completed. Well, that's not exactly how development happens, as we know. The individual lots come into place. We can have a Sunnybrook kind of a subdivision come in. We can require a fair amount of requirements from them, but really if their analysis shows that they don't necessarily break an intersection or break the capacity of a 2-lane road or whatever, then they're not. We can't really force them to do an off-site improvement. But yet, it still may feel very much congested to a property owner who lives in the neighborhood. He or she feels every new car or every bit of congestion as a result of that new subdivision. So there's that perception that has made significant increases, when in reality what we kind of hear from, and we spent a fair amount of time with John Replinger, that they analyze each of those individually, whereas the TSP is really kind of a much higher level of analysis, but it's got safety or conservative assumptions in it, so that we feel pretty confident we feel very confident that plan meets our needs. Whether or not the improvements that it calls for happen in the right order of the development that's built is kind of the disconnect.
Which is interesting, because if they don't have the sewer capacity, you'll do a sewer moratorium. So would it be a parallel? If they literally did not have the traffic capacity, would you have a moratorium until you got the traffic
Possibly,
fixed?
possibly we would. I mean, example that we are dealing with right now is Beaver Creek in 213, where the conversation is more about, rather than doing a moratorium, looking at adjusting the standard, right? You can't really adjust the standard of a sewer when you got it bubbling up out of the manhole. But you can adjust traffic when, you can adjust your standard with traffic when it means, yeah, you're going to have cars backing up more, but maybe it's something that can happen for 2 hours instead of an hour. So that's how the traffic modeling in the region is that's how it's
They
moving
can change
to.
level of service.
Level of service
Yeah, right,
is
right.
changing. You can't really do that. You can to some degree with a pipeline and say, we're going to allow 5 feet of surcharge in that system. But once you get to the rim, you could say, well, our level of service is going to be maybe a little bit more than that in the sewer line. But you can't. Once it's exceeding the capacity of the system, that's where we're at with our sewer system, and that's why we ended up with the moratorium.
I still would like to know. At which point the TAC would add value to the planning commission, like.
That's a good point.
Why would they come to? What would we provide him that the staff is not already advising him and providing him that information?
Yeah,
That's the issue right there.
I struggle with that too, because I just think that, for one, the timelines are bad. We already talked about that.
I agree.
The timelines are bad, and where's our legal authority to actually provide, direction there? We can provide opinions, and most of these decisions, that's a detailed level analysis, and we do rely on the professional. We rely on John Replinger, and we rely on the developers consultants quite a bit to fill in those gaps there. But most of that testimony goes to the Planning Commission, and it's in the Planning Commission reports. Again, I feel like if the TAC wanted to, if they were aggressive and had lots of passion about this topic, and were willing to look at all those staff reports and attend those meetings, and then provide us updates and kind of try to develop a recommendation that the TAC would stand behind and vote on, and then have some. It doesn't have to be just one person, but then they'd have to go back to the Planning Commission and say, we reviewed this, and here's some issues that we think you need to consider more. I know the Planning Commission would consider that, but that's some energy that I don't see. I see the desire, I see the interest, but that's work.
I could see maybe potentially if there's an annexation that's not covered in a TSP.
If there's a what?
Like somebody's going to go annex a piece of land into the city that's not included in transportation system plan, then maybe there would be an input from us. Okay, does this make sense?
Or a more major zone change.
Something like that.
10 to 8 in the kind of developments we see in Oregon City. Most of the properties in Oregon City are so parceled up already that it's very unusual for more than one parcel to be something big enough to really impact. What are we going to have? Maybe 5 units or something. Out of all our zone changes, I don't think we've seen anything that goes from a one low density to a higher density that's resulted in that many units. I haven't been watching them, but I don't recall much like that. It's usually a couple of units per. I think that Sunnybrook one was a good example, because out of all that, that's a pretty big development out there, and we still just got 2 units out of it.
Right now, we're facing much more dwelling units, possibly in the new annexations, because they're so large. But I think that another area that should be looked at in regard to the TSP is the value designated for each project. If development comes sooner than later, then maybe, I'll just take Park Place because that's where I know most of the topography there. If a huge amount of homes are being built in that concept plan area, and there's in the TSP, a long-range plan to improve Redland Road, for example. I'm not sure that there is, but if there was, but it was, say, a 10 years or further forward plan, would we be able to move it up to 5 years into the future? Or, what's the possibilities of that happening?
Interesting that you raised that. So we want to look, if you remember, we're doing this SDC analysis, or we did the SDC forum. I don't know if you guys remember that. With that came some suggestion that we look at increasing the list to provide the list of projects, not necessarily increasing the SDC, but increasing the list of projects so that staff would have the flexibility that if a developer came in and it needed improvement, even though it wasn't on the list of projects, or if it's not on the list of projects, we're kind of stuck there. We can add that one, but typically we wouldn't fund that project. The developer may still be required to do it, but it couldn't be funded with SDCs. So the commission said we'd like to be more flexible with our ability to use those SDCs on projects like that. So let's increase the list, right? Increase the list of funded projects, but don't increase the SDC, so that it's basically we'll never be able to fund all the projects, but we have enough flexibility to
choose from.
So because of that effort, it's opened a little can of worms for us, because questions are definitely going to rise about what does it really mean. So we're working on a scope of work with DKS, the consultant who did our TSP, and our intent is to go back and look at the list, look at the detailed cost estimates in that list, look at the priority of that list, and look at reevaluate all those items, as well as the amount of SDC match, right? Because if you look at a brand new road that's providing a lot of, let's say Myers Road, the new Myers Road connection, that project is listed as 100% SDC fundable, right? It's all new development, it's all new capacity. But if you look at, say, the roundabout at up the hilltop, up at the Lynn, that project's, I don't know what the percentage, I forgot what the percentage is, but let's just say it's 50% funded by SDCs. The other 50% is supposed to come from something else, right? So those ratios of how much it should be funded by SDCs versus something else is something that we're also wanting to look at. So that's coming, and we will bring that to the TAC. And that's going to have, it's not a huge scope of work for DKS, because it's a lot of re-verification, not necessarily redo. But I think having the conversation with the TAC is the first place to have it, so that we can reach some consensus there. And you guys can look at as much of that detail as you want to. I'm open to that for sure. And at the end of the day, what I'm hoping we still get to is probably a list of projects that's longer than what we can afford given the current SDC. But we haven't seen we've heard more from the City Commission about keeping SDCs the same, or finding ways to mitigate the cost of SDCs so that development can happen. Not so much on the residential side, but more on the commercial side. And I think it's more about living within our current SDC, but finding flexibility in which projects could be funded with those SDCs. So glad you raised it. We've been thinking about it, trying to get to a point where we could analyze that in more detail. So it's essentially kind of opening up the TSP a little bit and delving more into the financial part of it, or the project, the capital side of it.
Do you guys have, like, if it's, when you said 50% SDCs and then 50% something else, let's say the developer is doing a project and it's going to be like 500 home subdivision development, and they're going to be dealing with that roundabout, and 50% of that is SDC creditable. The 50% eventually was going to be funded by the city because it's for greater good. Would then developer come up with those other 50%, build a whole roundabout, and then get reimbursed not through SDCs, but through the couple funds from the city? If it was,
Well, there's some challenges to that, but generally, yeah, if a developer builds something and they're responsible for 50% of it, they need to pay for that. If they build, a roundabout, that obviously the whole thing has to happen, and STCs could be a method of reimbursing them for that.
for the
Yeah.
other 50%.
Yeah, but if one of the problems we have is our projects that are SDC funded, there's typically SDCs there at the time that we need them to fund that project. But if it's only funded by 50% by SDCs, one of the problems we have is the money match, right? We don't we don't have the gas tax. We can maybe throw some pavement maintenance dollars if it's a redo of a roadway, but usually that's pretty small on it. Somehow, so we've been trying to get grants, but the grant funding is kind of drying up too. So we have a little disconnect on how we can do that. So I'm a little bit excited about the county's proposal because I think that helps to provide some of that money match to projects, especially that aren't SDC, don't have enough SDC funding for them, but yet they're needed projects. I mean, Washington and 12th is another possible example, probably going to end up needing a signal there. Well, that project's in our TSP. It's got SDC funding allocated to it, but majority of that problem isn't all new development. It's a combination of new and existing. So we could pay for, whatever the percentage is that comes out of the TSP. Actually, we would
So
look.
the
we
whole
would
thing
look,
is SDC creditable? That intersection?
Some of it could be, yeah, because it's the reason it's driven is because of the new growth, but there's other, benefits to that, and a lot of it's got to do with existing use as well. So it's complicated. What I'm telling you though is that you raise a good point. We're going to open that up and look at that a little bit more. You'll probably get a little more insight into that, but I still, back to John's point, there's a disconnect between the TSP and that analysis and the individual lot development and that analysis. And but I feel like both are competent analysis, and it's just more a matter of phasing, timing, and the willingness of the community and your elected leaders to set SDCs at the right rate, set, or does the community really want to pay for those improvements?
Or capacity levels, so you
Or
accept
level of
more
capacity.
congestion.
Yeah, that's kind of all those are kind of moving factors, and then to your point is I'm struggling with how TAC can, other than work at it from more of that transportation system plan level review. It's not really your place in the detailed review, I guess.
John makes a good point. I don't want to see the planning commission get into the conversation that we're having here. This is our purview here, the details and implementation of a transportation system plan. I don't want to see the planning commission get involved in the details and get down into the, as they say, the weeds, of implementing a plan. They've got their plate full with comprehensive plan review and metro and quasi-judicial plan reviews and state mandates and things of that nature. We don't. But if we continue to implement the details of a transportation system plan, I think we're well within our responsibility and duties. And I would argue that this is where we ought to be. And because there's, like John says, there's that disconnect between the plan review and 120 days, you got to get this done, and staff support and stuff like that. So if you separate those two, I there for a minute thought maybe we could join them. I was wrong. I think we ought to keep them separate. I think this group here ought to be involved in transportation safety and the implementation of a traffic plan, and let the planning commission do its thing as mandated by state law. Because if you merge them, I think you're asking for a lot of complications.
I mean, I agree. I think focusing more, in my mind, trying to help those individual property owners with real issues is more important, and putting that energy and effort, like even traffic calming plans and those things, that people will see the benefit. You know, even if you have that congestion now that's a result of additional lots, then we could kind of come in and try to deal with some of that stuff and,
Exactly.
and come up with a
We're better
solution.
designed to react as requested by those people. When they come before us with a complaint or a comment, we're better suited to respond to those people. Planning Commission's not. They're
Well,
not.
I've said it before that sometimes the planning commission or some other commission, whatever, will make a decision, and part of it will be in regard to transportation, and sometimes those decisions come back to the TAC 10, 12, 15 years later that we have to handle because thought wasn't put far enough into the future, what the impact, eventual impact would be. And we've seen that several times where people have come to us, well, tonight, you know, the increase in traffic on Lynn Avenue and the speeding problems there, and it's just a natural growth of the city. That, people come from out of city down Lynn Avenue. So another thing I got out of that planning commission, though, was something was mentioned about us contacting or being in touch with TriMet. And that kind of hit a high note with me because of the lack of services that TriMet provides Oregon City in relation to the amount of taxes that the business owners pay to TriMet. I mean, it's a huge, huge amount of money. And I think we should be in talks with TriMet on how they can improve their services to the city. Now, they've improved their bus routes up Holcomb Boulevard, and that's been taken in great delight from the people in the lower income housing project up there. But I think their next logical step would be South End Road. Now, there's a lot of people out there in South End Road that might use TriMet if it was available. But again, TriMet says, well, we can't justify it because we don't have any ridership. Well, then you turn around and say, well, if we don't have TriMet, we can't provide the ridership. So it's a catch-22. So I think that we should, as a group, approach TriMet, ask them to come to us and not tell us about all the good things they're doing for the new light rail line in Milwaukee. That doesn't help Oregon City much. That's just something I got out of that meeting with the Planning Commission. Is maybe we should be talking to TriMet.
Somebody tie a neat bow on this conversation, or it's another conversation? So at least you said you're coming back with the SDC
Right.
analysis.
That's going to be forthcoming. I don't, like I said, I just received today kind of their scope. It's a small scope, pretty focused on this project list piece. So we haven't put a lot of energy into public outreach and those kind of things. But to me, it's always been Transportation Advisory Committee would be the right group to kind of vet a lot of that stuff and share that information. So
I know that you had a financing section to the TSP. I don't know how many pages that was, but maybe we could have that section of the TSP when you present this, so we can look at, what is it, 5 years ago we did the TSP, or 4, something like that. We could look at the actual projects that were all in there and the various variety of funding sources for them, including SDCs, and see where all this fits.
Would be also be good, I guess, maybe to understand, like, okay, now 5 years later, this is what we have accomplished out of that TSP.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
So okay, they could
An update.
put in green the ones that they've completed, right?
Yeah, I mean, something like
Whatever.
this is what we, you guys were involved in these discussions, and these projects are now reality. And
Okay.
Okay, we're into communications. The ODOT notice on cable barrier project flyer.
Actually, there's still one item under Public Works Report, July, August. So there's the May citizen comment follow-up. Just to give you a follow-up on the items that came before TAC at the last month. The sixplex that came in for the parking issues, we've got them connected with planning and with Public Works Engineering, and they're trying to resolve that issue. As I know now, there's still no resolution, but they're connected to the right departments finally. Regarding the lady who had come in regarding the stop sign at 6th and Madison and the striping parking issue, we've got to follow up with her with some follow-up questions, but we're still working on that. And then the other group that came was the vibration issues, and there's still nothing else to follow up with those. July, August tax meeting schedule. Does the membership want to have a July and August meeting, or July and not August, or not July and August, or what's the preference?
Is there a need?
Typically, we haven't. The next meeting in July would be on the 19th. If we were to have one on the 19th, and then August 16th. I'll be out of town on August 16th, but I'll be in town on the 19th. So that's just me. And I don't know if Martin's looked at the schedule, but it's quite likely that there would be a need as we move forward with this transportation system plan list review, because I think that's not going to take a lot of, because like I said, it's resurrecting the old and re-looking at those numbers, reaffirming those numbers, and I think the big effort's going to be reprioritizing those.
But that's not going to be July. That would have to be August.
Probably. Yeah.
You're just kicking them off now.
Yeah.
Think they can get it done by 19th?
Probably not.
Why don't you,
How about if I look at that schedule, and that would be the one item I wouldn't mind, and maybe it's a special meeting 1st of August as opposed to,
yeah, sure.
Let's see if we can't figure that out. And,
Yeah, we'll have to be dealing, of course, with people's vacation plans and all, but you have to do that all the time anyway. So.
Yeah.
Okay, are we to the cable barrier project?
There's nothing to discuss there. That's just information, for you.
Oh, okay.
There are a couple items, because I think that's it, right?
For what I had, but you had some stuff for the Public Works side that you wanted to add.
Did I? I'm forgetting.
Volunteer pay and
Oh, yeah. So, every year, the city acknowledges volunteers, and this year they're volunteering you with a... this year they're honoring your volunteering with the concert in the park, and it's Johnny Limbo and the Lugnuts. I can't remember if they did that last year. I know they did an acknowledgement, but I don't remember if it was at that concert, which is a pretty well-attended concert. And there's a free meal in here, a free ticket for a free meal, and so we'll just pass those around, make sure everybody gets some, and then we'll make sure those that are absent don't get there. But they're a thank you for your volunteer time, and I know the mayor acknowledges that at that.
those stickers
that meeting
are
as well.
kind of like your pass for the event, so you get your admission, and I think there's food and beverages associated with it.
Yeah, I think the concert's free, so but the meal is not. So
But it's free for us volunteers,
yes,
the meal.
Yeah.
with your heart badge or that
Yeah.
badge on there.
Sticker, yep.
So, what was the date on that, John? Do you have
August 18th.
August 18th? So again, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be gone, but we do appreciate your service. Then the other one was just the community development director. So whoever it is that's going to take over Tony Conkle's position in the planning department, they're working through the selection process. And just recently we got notice that Monday, June 27th, they're going to have a meet and greet from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Museum of the Oregon Territory. And I don't know how many candidates will be there, but I think they're going through some first round interviews, going to narrow the list, and the top.
This is for planning director?
For the planning director.
What was the time again?
It's from 5:30 to 7 p.m. We'll hand this out.
There's a handout that we'll give you.
So we'll just keep one in case questions comes up.
Where's Tony moving to?
Tony's
He's
our
the
city
city
manager.
manager.
Oh,
He was.
He's moving upstairs.
He's moved. He's up there. So yeah, he's the city manager, and so yeah, we'll see how that goes. Should be a nice opportunity to meet the planning, or I guess it's the community development director. So.
For city manager, they had those finalists listed in the newspaper, I think, before the meet and greet. So do you think there'll be an article out on that or not?
I don't know. It's not, probably not. I think it's really just an opportunity to.
Won't be quite that comprehensive a screening process.
I don't really know, John. Have you asked?
No, I don't know if they're planning a media event or not.
Yeah, I don't know if they're planning a media event, but they're definitely opening it up to folks that would be interested. And I'm assuming they're using the neighborhood association and CIC and all those email lists that they have to share this invite. But looks like hors d'oeuvres will be served.
Yeah.
And you can grill them, I'm sure, with all your land use questions and transportation questions. You should be throwing them some wingers.
Future agenda items, anything that anybody would want on the future agendas that have not already been mentioned?
I know, I was just looking through some past stuff. We talked about crosswalks, and we talked about Henry. So Gary, you were interested in talking a little bit more about crosswalks, and Henry was interested in talking about gas tax. So again, be interesting to see what kind of comes out of Clackamas County with the gas tax proposal that they're working on. I know there was an article in the paper today. Again, I don't know if this group wants since we're not meeting, it seems like, other than maybe for this TAC thing, I'd rather stay focused on that. And I guess our first meeting would be September, other than maybe that, let's call it a special meeting right now.
John, maybe you could explain how the county was proposing to share the revenue amongst the cities in the rural areas.
So
there's a formula there or something like that.
Yeah, the county, I don't have any of that in front of me, but the county basically went out for an advisory vote and asked the voters if they, I mean, really the question to me seemed like, do you want a chance to vote on any kind of revenue options for street maintenance? And they offered up a vehicle registration fee and a gas tax as kind of the two options that they were looking at. And both of them they kind of advertised as being kind of term limited to 7-year term. And the vehicle registration fee was either $25 every year per vehicle, and the gas tax was, I want to say 5-cent gas tax, or I don't know that they listed the amount of the gas tax, but by law, the vehicle registration fee, so if it's countywide, it would have to be countywide. Vehicle registration fees, the law is specific on how they split that between the incorporated areas or the cities and the unincorporated areas. And the way the law reads is the cities get 40% and the county gets 60%. So it's a pretty clean method, and math is pretty straightforward. And for Oregon City, I think it meant about $500,000 a year in revenue that would be available for transportation improvements of some sort. The county's position is they need it for maintenance. So they've been, you know, what we fund our pavement maintenance what we fund using our pavement maintenance fee is what they don't have that, and they really can't adopt I understand by law they can't adopt a pavement maintenance utility fee like the cities can. So they were proposing that be the funding mechanism for road maintenance, pavement maintenance. The gas tax doesn't have that formula. It doesn't require that formula. So it's up to the county to make the determination on whether or not they're going to share any of that money with the cities, or keep it for themselves, or share a portion of it. What would the portion be?
And how does that get taxed? So, like, the gas stations within the county would have that 5-cent surcharge.
It would be collected just like the gas taxes are today. So it would go through the state, and the state would allocate it back to the county.
It would just be gas stations within the boundaries of Clackamas County.
Right. Yep.
Not the Beaverton.
Not Beaverton. No. Multnomah County already has gas tax, and I think I can't remember if Washington County does or not. But yeah, so they would just be gas stations, any gas sold in Clackamas County. And
That include gas sold to farmers to their own tanks?
yes, any gas commercially sold would get that. So per gallon, they were talking about somewhere between a 6 and 8 cent tax at the last meeting that we heard, and the county commissioners are meeting on it. I want to say it's June 28th that they're meeting as a county commission to decide whether or not they're going to pursue the gas tax. Most of the cities were suggesting that they pursue a gas tax versus a vehicle registration
Is that bigger
fee.
revenue source?
Is it
Is that bigger revenue potential?
Actually,
revenue?
we didn't see the numbers. They didn't have the numbers for. The idea was to try and raise a similar amount, but the gas tax is a lot harder to predict because you don't know how many gallons you're going to sell versus the vehicles, where you pretty much know how many vehicles you have based on, years of registrations. So I think the vehicle registration fee is a lot more predictable than the gas tax, but the gas tax is a little easier. And the other argument that was made was that, the county really doesn't have to ask the voters for a vehicle registration fee. They've committed to doing that, but they don't have to do that. A gas tax they do have to ask the voters for. And so the thought in the room was that the commission should go with, and there's more public support for a gas tax than there would be for a vehicle registration fee. At least that's what the polling numbers look like. So based on that information, the cities were more supportive of the idea of a gas tax over a certain period of time. I think it was 7 years, somewhere between 6 and 8 cents, and that the only way the cities were going to support that in their own kind of advertising, and to the degree we can support a measure like that, would be if the county agreed to the same split as a vehicle registration fee. So the county was open to that. So they make a decision on that. I feel like it's the 28th of June. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does the gas tax apply to diesel fuel for trucks?
Yes. It's more of a fuel tax than a gas tax, I guess. But yeah, I don't know how many truck stops there are in Clackamas County, but
Well, there's probably some trucking associations that would spend some money to defeat it then.
yeah, no, I'm certain there's somebody out there that's going to fund a no tax increase campaign against it.
Okay, I don't know if everybody knew it, but Commissioner Carol Pauley had to resign her position because family issues, and she'll be moving out of the city limits, so she can't serve as commissioner. any further. She was a good lady, I thought. Did a good job. Okay, this meeting is adjourned.